I want you to imagine, just for a second, that you are driving to a highly important, like strictly scheduled corporate meeting.
Oh, man. Just the thought of that is stressing me out a little.
Right. Your bosses are waiting, the clock is ticking, the stakes are incredibly high, and frankly, your company has a reputation for firing people who are even 5 minutes late.
Yeah, the classic high-pressure corporate environment.
Exactly. And then right in the middle of this high-pressure commute, you see a random dirt road, and you just decide to take a 1,100-mile detour.
Wait, 1,100-mile detour?
Yeah. Just to see what's down there.
I mean, getting fired would probably be the best-case scenario in that situation. You'd be looking at some serious legal trouble for wasting company resources on that scale.
Oh, absolutely, which makes the 17th century equivalent of this exact scenario so absolutely mind-blowing. Today, we are doing a deep dive into the life and legacy of a Dutch-French explorer named François Thijssen.
It is such a wild story.
It really is. This is a captain who went totally off script, challenged the map of the world, proved the Australian continent wasn't just some, icy appendage attached to Antarctica, and he initiated a rare, peaceful first contact with Australia's First Nations people.
And we have some incredible sources for this, too.
We do. We are pulling from an amazing stack of sources, maritime historical archives, comprehensive encyclopedias, and incredibly detailed indigenous oral histories preserved by the Murning people.
Which is just a fantastic blend of perspectives.
It is. Okay, let's unpack this. Because to really understand how wild Thijssen's detour was, we have to grasp just how punishing the corporate culture of his employer actually was.
Yeah, so we are talking about the Dutch East India Company, the VOC, and honestly, calling them a corporation almost feels too small.
Like an understatement.
Totally. By 1626, when our story starts, they are the world's first true mega corporation. I mean, they operated with their own armies, their own laws, and just a ruthless obsession with efficiency.
Profit above all else.
Exactly. Their entire business model relied on getting ships from Europe to the spice-rich Moluccas via their headquarters in Batavia, which is modern-day Jakarta, as fast as humanly possible.
So when Thijssen leaves Middelburg in the Netherlands on May 22nd, 1626, commanding a ship named the Golden Seahorse, he isn't out there to boldly go where no man has gone before.
No, not at all.
He is basically a delivery driver on a very strict route.
Yeah, the VOC did not fund casual exploration. They required their captains to use something called the Brouwer route.
Right, and I was reading about this in the maritime archives, and the mechanics of it are terrifying. The Brouwer route wasn't just a line on a map. It was essentially a hack of the Earth's atmosphere.
That is a great way to describe it.
You sail south from the Cape of Good Hope, and you deliberately drop your ship into these brutal, screaming westerly winds called the Roaring Forties.
And it acts like an oceanic superhighway. Those winds, they whip around the bottom of the globe with nothing to slow them down, pushing ships at terrifying speeds across the southern Indian Ocean.
But driving on a superhighway only works if you know where your exit is.
True.
And my understanding of 17th century navigation is that while they could figure out their latitude, how far north or south they were by measuring the sun or stars, longitude was basically a guessing game.
Oh, longitude was the defining crisis of this era.
Yeah.
I mean, to know your longitude, your east-west position, you have to know the exact time back at your home port compared to your local time.
And they didn't have Apple Watches.
Right. And mechanical pendulum clocks simply do not work on a wooden ship being violently pitched around by ocean swells.
So it's like driving a race car blindfolded and trying to guess when to hit the brakes based on how long you've been pressing the gas.
That is exactly what it was like. So Thijssen is riding this conveyor belt of wind, trying to guess the exact moment to turn north and shoot straight up to Batavia.
And on January 26, 1627, he realizes he waited way too long.
Yep. He slams into the southwestern tip of the Australian continent, near what we now call Cape Leeuwin.
Which is a catastrophic navigational error.
Right. It was, but a common one. Other VOC ships had bumped into that coastline before for the exact same reason.
Which brings me to something that makes absolutely no sense based on the sources. If the VOC is hyper-obsessed with profit and Thijssen just missed his exit, the logical move is to immediately turn north.
Correct the mistake.
Exactly. Correct the mistake, get to Jakarta, and deliver the goods. Instead, the logs show he turns east. He sails parallel to this massive, uncharted, highly dangerous coastline.
Yeah, it defies VOC logic.
Why on earth would a career VOC captain risk the wrath of his corporate bosses, and maybe even execution for mutiny or dereliction of duty, to go exploring?
Well, the answer is actually hidden in the passenger manifest of the Golden Seahorse. What's fascinating here is that Thijssen wasn't the only authority figure on board.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he was carrying a man named Peter Neitz.
I saw that name pop up. He was an executive, wasn't he?
He was. He was a newly appointed member of the Council of India, which made him one of the highest-ranking VOC officials in the entire world. So Thijssen was the captain of the ship, sure, but Neitz outranked him in the corporate hierarchy. Having an executive in the passenger cabin changes the dynamic completely.
Oh, I bet it does.
It gave Thijssen the political armor he needed. If the boss on board authorizes a massive detour to see if there's gold or a new trade route down there, the captain's neck is suddenly off the chopping block.
That makes so much more sense. So with Neitz signing the permission slips, they don't just take a quick peek, they commit.
Oh, they go all in.
They sail roughly 1,800 kilometers, which is about 1,100 miles along what we now know as the Great Australian Bight.
Into completely unknown, incredibly treacherous waters.
I kept trying to visualize how they actually mapped this. We just established they had no reliable way to measure longitude.
None at all.
So how do you map 1,100 miles of coastline with, like, staggering precision, as the encyclopedias call it, while bobbing in the Southern Ocean?
They relied heavily on dead reckoning and a brutal, really tedious technique using a lead line.
How does that work?
Well, dead reckoning involves throwing a piece of wood attached to a knotted rope overboard, counting how many knots slipped through your hands over set time, which they measured by a sandglass, and calculating your speed.
Okay.
Then you combine that with your compass heading.
That sounds incredibly prone to error. Like a strong ocean current could push you sideways and ruin your math completely.
Oh, it absolutely could, which is why mapping a coast required them to stay terrifyingly close to it. To measure the depth, sailors had to constantly heave a heavy lead weight, often coated in animal fat, to bring up samples of the seafloor into the freezing water, haul it back up, and record the depth.
That sounds exhausting.
It was. They would then triangulate their position by taking compass bearings on prominent cliffs or islands as they slowly moved past them. Doing this accurately for 1,800 kilometers while fighting the Southern Ocean is just a masterpiece of seamanship.
And the geographical payoff is massive. By doing this grueling work all the way down to Fowler's Bay and a cluster of islands they named St. Francis and St. Peter, Thijssen definitively proves that New Holland is its own distinct landmass.
Yes.
Yeah.
He literally severs Australia from Antarctica on the map.
Which is huge because before this, European geographers just assumed any land down there was the northern edge of a frozen global supercontinent.
Right. The scene completely shattered that theory. He drew a southern border for this new world.
And while he's out there taking these soundings and doing this incredible cartography, the sources highlight a perspective that history books usually ignore.
Yes.
Thijssen was staring at the longest continuous cliff line in the world, the Bunda Cliffs, which drop hundreds of feet straight into a churning ocean. But while he was looking at the shore, someone was looking back.
The First Nations Mirning people.
Exactly.
They have lived along that immense, dramatic coastline for tens of thousands of years.
Imagine you're standing on those sheer cliffs. You know every rock, every season, every animal, and suddenly you look out over the ocean and you see this bizarre, floating, wooden alien structure covered in white sails.
I mean, it would be fundamentally world-altering. But the sources, specifically from the whaledreaming.eu project, emphasize something really vital here.
What's that?
The Mirning people were not caught off guard. They possessed highly sophisticated observation protocols.
The smoke signals.
Exactly.
I initially thought of smoke signals as just a localized, generic, like, hey, look over here kind of thing. But the sources describe it as an expansive communication network.
Yeah, it functioned much more like an information relay system across hundreds of miles. By modulating the smoke, different groups could pass specific warnings down the coast faster than any ship could sail.
That's incredible.
So by the time the Golden Seahorse actually dropped anchor or sent a boat near the shore, the Mirning had already tracked its progress and organized their response.
And the proof of this is astonishing because we don't just have to rely on the Dutch logbooks to know it happened. The Mirning preserved this exact encounter in their Aboriginal oral traditions, passed down through elders like Coolbari, Mickey Free Laurie, and Bunalori.
It's just a pristine historical record.
Auntie Iris Burgoyne, another elder featured in the research, spoke with absolute certainty about the stories of the strange ship with the big white sails.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, You are looking at two radically different parallel systems of data storage validating the exact same historical moment.
I love that framing.
Right. You have the VOC using ink, paper, dead reckoning, and centralized European archives. And you have the Murning using rigorous oral traditions.
Because people often misunderstand oral history.
They do. They view it as a game of telephone where the story degrades over time. But in many indigenous cultures, including the Murning, passing down history involves strict protocols, cross-checking by multiple elders, and embedding the data into songs and landscape markers to ensure perfect fidelity over centuries.
I am so glad you explained the mechanics of that, because the survival of that memory over 400 years is breathtaking.
It really is.
And it brings up a detail that honestly made me suspicious at first. When I read about European first contact during the colonial era, it almost universally involves violence, exploitation, or immediate tragedy.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Yet both the Dutch records and the Murning oral histories describe this specific interaction as peaceful. Why? What made this encounter the exception to a very bloody rule?
It really comes down to a mix of corporate policy and local power dynamics.
Right.
For the VOC, violence was a tool for securing trade monopolies, like a spice port. And violence was expensive.
Right. They had a bottom line to protect.
Exactly. Thijssen and Knights were on a massive detour, far from their supply lines, looking at a landscape that offered no obvious cities to conquer or immediate wealth to extract. Engaging in hostilities offered zero return on investment.
And from the Murning side, they are standing on their home turf, having communicated the ship's arrival well in advance. They aren't panicked, they are organized, they extend hospitality from a position of profound confidence.
The environment dictated the terms. The Dutch were out of their element, simply observing, and the Murning were securely in theirs. It resulted in a fleeting, mutual curiosity rather than conquest.
It is a rare, beautiful moment in an otherwise dark era of global expansion. But eventually, the detour has to end. A Thijssen turns the Golden Seahorse around, and on April 10th, 1627, he and Peter Knights finally pull into Batavia.
You have to assume the VOC executives were waiting on the docks, tapping their pocket watch.
Oh, absolutely. They had to be furious.
But Thijssen avoided the chopping block by handing over the data. The VOC executives were cold, calculating businessmen, but they recognized the value of accurate intelligence.
Data is money.
Precisely. They took Thijssen's meticulous soundings and observations and handed them straight to Hessel Gerrits, their master cartographer.
And by 1628, Gerrits publishes the stunningly accurate chart of the Indies and New Holland. But reading the map reveals the most depressing corporate irony of the 17th century.
Oh, the naming of it.
Yes. Thijssen sails the ship. Thijssen navigates the Roaring Forties. Thijssen oversees the grueling dead reckoning, and lead-line drops in freezing waters to map an entire southern continent. And what does the VOC name this monumental discovery?
And Land van Peter Knights.
The Land of Peter Knights. They slap the executive's name on the map. The guy who probably sat in his cabin the whole time gets an entire chunk of a continent named after him.
I mean, history is often written by the people who approve the budgets. Knights had the political capital. Thijssen was just the employee executing the labor.
So the bureaucrat gets immortalized. What happens to François Thijssen, the actual explorer?
Well, he blends back into the massive machine of the VOC. He successfully sails the Golden Seahorse back to Middelburg over the next couple of years. He's clearly viewed as a reliable company man because by 1636, they give him command of another ship, the Valk.
Okay, so he gets another command.
He does, but the ocean in the 1600s was an industrial meat grinder. The mortality rate for VOC crews was staggering, mostly from scurvy, disease, or simply vanishing into storms.
And the sources mention his story abruptly ends on October 13th, 1638. The Valk goes down near Pulicat off the southeast coast of India.
Yeah, that is where Thijssen is believed to have drowned. He mapped the edge of the world, only to be swallowed by a completely different ocean while doing a routine run for the company.
The machine just consumes him, which makes me wonder about his final thoughts.
This raises an important question, doesn't it?
Yeah. Did Thijssen die knowing he had completely rewritten human geography? Did he know he had outlined a continent?
It is highly unlikely he grasped the full magnitude of it, mostly because of how the VOC reacted to his map. To the Dutch executives, the detour was a failure.
A failure after all that work.
To them, yeah. They analyzed Thijssen's reports, noted the massive cliffs and the lack of obvious resources like gold or easily accessible spices, and officially deemed the entire region dry and cursed.
Dry and cursed, so they put his masterpiece of a map in a vault and just ignored it.
They ghosted an entire coastline. Once Thiessen's ship vanished over the horizon in 1627, no European vessel would return to that part of the Great Australian Bight for 165 years.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. The VOC might have locked the map away, but the sheer remoteness of Thijssen's discovery completely ignited the Enlightenment imagination in Europe.
It became legendary.
You have this incredibly detailed map of a coastline at the absolute bottom of the known world, and nobody has been there in generations. It becomes this mythical blank canvas.
And fiction writers were the first to exploit it.
I couldn't believe this detail when I read it. Jonathan Swift publishes Gulliver's Travels in 1726. He needs a believable, impossibly remote location for his fictional lands of Lilliput and Blefuscu. You know, the places with the tiny people.
Right.
So he looks at world maps, spots the Neates Archipelago from Thijssen's 1628 chart, and literally places his fictional islands right next to it. He used Thijssen's precise geography to anchor his fantasy.
It's amazing. But the irony is that some real-world geographers had fantasies that were just as wild as Jonathan Swift's.
Oh, completely.
In 1717, a Swiss-Dutch planner named Jean-Pierre Pury pitched the VOC on building a massive new colony right there on Thijssen's coastline.
Wait, based on what? The VOC already had the data saying it was a harsh, difficult landscape?
Well, Pury was a believer in a pseudo-scientific concept called climatic theory. During the Enlightenment, there was this obsession with geometric order. Pury argued that because the Earth is a sphere, latitude is the absolute dictator of climate. He looked at a globe and saw that the land of Peter Knights sat at roughly 33 degrees south latitude.
Oh, I see where this is going. He just traced that line around the globe to see what else was on it.
Precisely. He noted that incredibly fertile regions like Chile and parts of the Barbary Coast in North Africa sat roughly around the 33rd parallel. Therefore, he concluded, this southern Australian coast must be a hidden paradise overflowing with wine, wheat, and wealth.
That is quite the leap.
He completely ignored ocean currents, prevailing winds, and the actual geology that Thijssen had painstakingly recorded.
He literally substituted a line on a globe for actual field data. Thankfully, the VOC directors dug into their archives, pulled out Thijssen's century-old reports describing the massive, forbidding cliffs, and rejected Pury's pitch.
It's a good thing they kept the receipts.
Yeah. And the coastline remained untouched until the era of true scientific exploration finally caught up with Thijssen's legacy.
We have to fast forward all the way to 1802.
Right in the middle of the Napoleonic Wars, the British send Matthew Flinders on a ship called the Investigator, and the French send Nicolas Baudin on the Géographe. They are essentially racing to chart this mysterious unknown coast.
High-stakes cartography.
And both of these cutting-edge 19th century explorers are carrying copies of Thijssen's 1628 Dutch chart.
Consider the technological gap here. Matthew Flinders is surveying with a marine chronometer. He finally has the technology to measure longitude accurately at sea. He is conducting highly sophisticated, modern cartography.
Meanwhile, Thijssen made his map by throwing a piece of wood attached to a rope over the side of a galleon while flipping a sandglass.
It's absurd when you compare them.
I love comparing this to finding a 175-year-old review for a restaurant, reading it, going there, and realizing the guy who wrote it was absolutely perfectly spot on about every single detail.
That's a perfect analogy. The accuracy of what Thijssen achieved with dead reckoning and lead lines was staggering to Flinders. When Flinders reached that cluster of islands at the end of the survey, he was so deeply moved by the precision of his 17th century predecessor that he officially retained the Dutch names.
Wow.
He permanently cemented the Knights Archipelago into modern geography, explicitly honoring the 1627 voyage.
So what does this all mean? We started this conversation by talking about a guy taking an unbelievable 1,100-mile detour. François Thijssen was supposed to be a compliant employee running a highly regulated corporate spice route.
But by choosing to veer off that prescribed path, whether covered by his boss or driven by his own curiosity, he severed a continent from Antarctica. He proved the existence of the Great Australian Bight.
He gave Jonathan Swift the edge of the world for his masterpiece, and he gave Matthew Flinders a map so good it practically defied the laws of 17th century physics.
And beyond the cartography, he and his crew managed to share a peaceful, mutually respectful historical moment with the morning people. A moment so impactful, it was permanently woven into an oral tradition that survived for 4 centuries.
Thijssen's life is the ultimate proof that sometimes the most enduring, world-changing legacies are born precisely because you strayed from your assigned route.
Absolutely. It's a testament to the power of curiosity.
Which leaves us with a fascinating thought to mull over. If a single unscripted detour in 1627 left a mark so profound that it survived in both the maps of Enlightenment scientists and the ancient oral histories of indigenous elders, what uncharted coasts in our own lives are we missing, simply because we are too blindly focused on our scheduled destinations?